Melanie and Will got married when they were still in college. They enjoyed every day and were young and carefree. So when Melanie got pregnant, they decided they weren't ready to have a baby yet. We don't have our own house, don't have the time or the money to raise the baby, and we're only a year and a half away from graduation. Are you going to quit? I'm not. I have to finish my studies. But with a baby, we won't have time. I understand. I'm not ready either. I just feel so bad, sighed Melanie. Melanie, a baby is not a kitten. You can't just give them some milk and let them grow up on their own. You can keep this baby if you want, but don't complain that I don't help you. I'm just warning you that I don't have time for this, Will said flatly. I know, Melanie sighed again. 3 days later, Melanie returned from the hospital and didn't leave the house for almost a week, lying in a bed with her face toward the wall. Will sympathized with his wife, but he had no regrets about what his wife had done. He took care of Melanie, proving his love, and she gradually recovered, and they returned to a normal life. The spouses graduated. They both got jobs in the fields they liked and began to build their life. First, they worked hard to buy their own house. Then they had to live for themselves, go on vacations, buy a car, and many other things young people want. The years went by. Melanie and Will got used to a comfortable, wealthy life and considered themselves lucky. They often traveled abroad, could afford lunches and dinners in expensive restaurants, and tried to spend their weekends on different trips. They decided to celebrate Melanie's 35th birthday outside, so they invited their guests to their country house. It was a spacious, beautiful house with everything needed for a comfortable stay. The party was fun, but Melanie noticed that Will enjoyed playing basketball with his friends' kids, laughing at the stories about the kids' antics. He spent more time with other people's kids than with his wife. She felt incredibly hurt. He was the one who did not let her have a baby, paid for 2 more abortions after the first one, and now he is having fun with the kids. Anna, the mother of the youngest of the boys, smiling, wiped her son's sweaty face. Danny, are you thirsty? Do you want some water? Yeah! The boy drank some water and hurried back diligently, taking the ball away from Will. How old is Danny? He just turned 3, Anna replied, embarrassed for some reason, and turned the conversation to another topic. The next day, Melanie decided to talk to her husband about kids again. Don't you think it's time for us to think about having a baby? Whoa, this is a bit unexpected. Well, I don't mind, Will said indifferently. For 2 long years, Melanie had been trying to get pregnant. She became nervous, frantic, and constantly nagging her husband. Will, too, was constantly arguing with his wife. The dissatisfaction with each other was growing like a snowball. Melanie spent a lot of time in hospitals, trying to restore women's health, spending a lot of money to pay for all sorts of treatments, and finally succeeded. She was over the moon when the long-awaited pregnancy finally happened. Will supported her, bought her everything she needed, tolerated her whims, and visited her when she was in the hospital for another examination. But one day, he couldn't take it anymore. Melanie, listen, I'm tired of living like this. I'm leaving you, Will said indifferently. What? Melanie wiped away her tears. I'm filing for divorce. I don't want to live with you anymore, her husband explained. Will, what the hell are you talking about? We've been living together for ages. Does this mean that you don't love me anymore? What about our son? You wanted a son so much. We're going to have a baby. Will! Melanie tried to convince her husband. Melanie, I already have children. I'm going to live with them. Do you remember Anna? She was at your anniversary party with her son Danny. That's my oldest son. And a year ago, Anna gave birth to Andrew. and I want to live with them. Also, I filed for divorce a long time ago. The papers are coming soon," Will finished. "What? What did you say? You've been lying to me this whole time. You forced me to have abortions while you have 2 illegitimate children? Bastard, get out! Get the hell out!" Melanie became hysterical. But as soon as Will stepped toward the exit, she rushed after him and begged him to stay. And then, crying out sharply, she clutched at her belly and began begging. "Help! Help me! I need help!" "Stop pretending, Melanie. I can't stand your drama." Will turned away and left the house. But as soon as he closed the door, he heard the sound of a body falling behind the door. He returned and quickly called the emergency. Doctors arrived quickly and took the woman to the hospital. That same day, Melanie gave birth to a premature, weak baby boy. Will looked at this pathetic, wrinkled creature, remembered his healthy, beautiful sons, took a piece of paper and signed a petition for relinquishment of parental rights. He thought the baby was so weak that he could hardly have survived, and then Will left without even visiting his wife. Melanie cried all the days she was in the hospital. She lost breast milk almost immediately. They didn't bring the baby to her. He needed constant medical supervision, so the baby was left at the hospital, and Melanie was discharged alone. For a few days, she visited her son, who had no name, and then she signed a petition too. "Have you decided what you want to name your baby?" the nurse asked Melanie. "I don't care. I'm going to leave him here. He broke my life," Melanie replied nervously. "Are you crazy? How can a baby break your life? Look at him. He's so miserable. First his father abandoned him, then his mother. Aren't you ashamed? I could understand you if you were stupid teenagers, but you're adults," the elderly nurse scolded her. "My husband left me," Melanie kept saying. "Forget him, but don't abandon the boy, please. Show some mercy," the nurse insisted. "I don't want to," she replied flatly. Melanie left. Other people named the baby Samuel and took care of him, giving him their love and attention. As it turned out, Samuel really wanted to live. His skinny body had incredible strength, and after battling death for the first month of his life, he withstood the battle and quickly began to gain weight. The cute boy easily recognized Mr. Morgan, the doctor who had cured him, and when the time came to place him in an orphanage, the doctor couldn't calm down. Mr. Morgan could not adopt the baby. He was a childless widower in his 50s, so there was little chance they would let him adopt Samuel. Still, he did not leave the child and visited him constantly. And then the orphanage where Samuel lived was disbanded. All the children were sent to an orphanage in another city. And some of them, including Samuel, were placed in other orphanages in different cities. So traces of Samuel were completely lost, and Mr. Morgan could no longer visit him. The boy's life was very rough. He was adopted twice. But the first time, when he was only 3 years old, they sent him back. The adoptive parents' biological children didn't want to accept the baby and insisted that his mom and dad get rid of him. A 5-year-old boy lived with the second family for a year, and then he ran away. This family already had about 10 children and was not much different from an orphanage. The family lived in the village and simply took advantage of the children's labor and also got financial support for all the foster children. They beat and punished the children all the time, so one day, Samuel left the house and never came back. He managed to get to the city dump, where he settled in an old rusty trailer, befriending a pack of stray dogs that lived there. Expired food was often brought to the dump, and Samuel would pick out something that was still good and eat it. One day, beggars came to the dump, and when they saw the child, they chased him away, shouting and cursing. "How dare you come here? Get out of here! This is our territory," the tramps kept saying. "Mister, but I haven't done anything wrong. I just don't have a place to live," the boy replied. "You son of a bitch, I'll have your guts for garters." This is our place, understand? Get out of here." The tramps kept chasing the boy away. But when one of the aggressive tramps took a swing at the child, an angry pack of dogs attacked him, and all the tramps ran away, fleeing from the dogs. The truck driver, who had brought some garbage to the dump, saw what had happened, drove up to the boy, and asked, "Who is this, Mowgli? What are you doing here, kiddo?" "I live here," the boy replied. "What do you mean, live? Where are your parents?" the man asked. "I don't know. I have no one," Samuel sighed. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Samuel," the boy answered quietly. "I see. You know what, Samuel? Why don't you get in my truck? Come with me and stay in my place for a while, and later we'll think about what to do," said the man, opening the door for the boy. The kind driver's name was Keith. He lived with his old mother, and when she saw the boy, she said in surprise, "Who is this young gentleman, Keith?" Keith told her everything and asked her to bathe and feed him. Samuel stayed with Keith and his mother for the whole week. They burned all his old clothes, gave him new shoes and new clothes, cut his hair, and made it look nice and neat. And every night when Samuel went to sleep, he asked God that he didn't have to leave this wonderful family. Next Sunday, Keith put the boy in the car and drove him somewhere. His mother gave Samuel a box with pastries and wiped away her tears with a handkerchief. Samuel stared out the window, enjoying the unfamiliar scenery. Then, tired from the long journey, he fell asleep. He opened his eyes only when the car stopped, and he heard some voices. Samuel looked around and saw that Keith drove him to the orphanage. "I'm sorry, Samuel, but I couldn't do otherwise," the man said. "You're a traitor," the boy shouted, trying to escape from the social workers holding him. "I told you, I begged you not to do it." Keith, feeling a heavy lump in his throat, looked at Samuel being taken away by force, and tears came to his eyes. And a box of pastries that Keith's mother gave the boy had been left on the sidewalk. Samuel spent the night delirious, and the next day social workers came to him and told him someone wanted to adopt him again. "No, no," Samuel shouted. "Please no, I beg you, I don't want to go anywhere." "Not even to me?" the man said. The surprised child turned to the familiar voice, saw the gray-haired man's familiar face. "Mr. Morgan!" Samuel rushed to him and burst into tears. The man cried, hugging the skinny body and stroking his small head. "Come on, get used to calling me Dad. Well, only if you don't mind. I've been trying to find you for so long, my dear Samuel, and I finally got the call. They told me they found you," said Mr. Morgan. Daddy, I knew you would find me," the boy said, hugging the man he had been waiting for so long. 20 years passed. Samuel grew up and followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a great doctor. He never forgot that Mr. Morgan had adopted him and almost worshipped him for it. Samuel had access to the documents and found out who his parents were. He saw the papers his biological parents signed, but he didn't want to meet Melanie and Will, putting them out of his mind. One day, during Samuel's shift, an elderly man was brought to the hospital with a heart attack. His wife, a poorly dressed woman with a pale, sickly face, was crying beside him. Samuel did everything he could to save the man, and he succeeded. Tired, he walked out into the hallway and comforted the woman. "Your husband will be fine. Don't worry, his life is no longer in danger." Melanie, that was her, glanced at the young doctor, and then looked at him with a long, attentive gaze. He reminded her of someone. No, she definitely met him somewhere before, only when Samuel turned and walked away, she went cold. His body, his gait, and of course his face. The copy of her young husband, Will, was in front of her just now. Melanie covered her mouth with her hand, holding back a burst of tears. Was it really her son? How many years had it been since the day she had left him? Yes, it all seemed to coincide. Melanie cried as she stood at the window, looking at the leaves falling from the trees, blown away by the wind. After Will left her, Melanie lived alone. First, he left her everything, their apartment, their country house, everything they owned. But she lived there like a watchman, unable to enjoy the luxuries around her. All days were alike to her. But later, Will filed to divide the property. The court decided to take away the apartment and the country house. All the property was sold, and Melanie bought a small apartment, where Will came later. 3 years ago, he came to her and asked her forgiveness. He wanted to go back to Melanie. When he got sick, his children and wife didn't need him anymore. They kicked him out, and Melanie forgave him. She didn't want to live alone anymore. But Will's eldest son, Danny, kept his father from living in peace, even in his old age. He constantly demanded money, and he caused Will's heart attack. Melanie sighed. It was heavy on her heart. Was this young doctor really their son? But how would she know? Meanwhile, Samuel went off to the staff room, and standing at the window, he thought that he just saved his biological father. But he felt nothing. He saw his mother. She was looking at him so closely. Samuel grinned, sadly. Where have you been all these years? When Will was discharged from the hospital, and Melanie came to pick him up, they saw Samuel in the hospital yard. He was walking with his beautiful wife and holding his son in his arms. With her head down, Melanie walked past. Then suddenly asked Will, not wanting to keep the terrible secret, "Do you know who treated you?" "Your son, the one you and I abandoned. And this is his family. Don't you recognize him? He looks just like you." "What? What did you say?" Will exclaimed, turned, and walked quickly towards Samuel. He stopped a step away. Their eyes met. They stared at each other for a minute, and Will realized that this guy knew everything. Melanie was right. Samuel was definitely his son. "Son," Will muttered. Samuel sighed and said, "You're wrong. I'm sorry. I have another father." And then added, "Get well." He hugged his wife and walked away. And Will just stood there and watched his son walk away, hearing Melanie sobbing softly behind him.